Yes. Well, hello, morena. I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday morning. I think I'm having a nice Sunday morning. I mean, I don't know. I'm coming to you from the past. This is Thursday morning, actually. The wonders of technology. A little bit strange, a little bit weird. I'm actually, at the moment, as you can see by the little musical mobile down there, I'm in the baby's room because it's the quietest room in the house. A little bit strange. And even stranger, I'm wearing a suit jacket and a collared shirt on a very hot day. One thing I've got to admit, it's always good for a preacher to be honest. I'm really glad that this video you don't have the ability to smell, because I'm sweating quite a bit because it's summery, very hot. Anyway, we'll leave that there. I thought I'd make an effort. I thought I'd look nice and chic this morning, because to be perfectly honest, every Sunday morning I'm watching church in my pajamas. So I thought I'd make an effort. I know, really strange, really bizarre. I mean, it's like the times that we're living in. Really strange and really bizarre times. We're living in a global pandemic. Most of us, apart from the essential workers, and thank you so much for all that you do in serving our community and our country with the essential work that you're doing. You're our heroes. Thank you so much. But apart from our essential workers, most of us are stuck at home in a lockdown here in Auckland. Parents are working from home. Kids are not at school, hopefully doing schoolwork. And it's all weird and it's a little bit strange and bizarre. But one thing has remained constant. One thing that I've observed, and it's kind of picked up pace a little bit in the last month or so, here, at least here in New Zealand, is conflict. I mean, conflict is a tale almost as old as time itself. Conflict has been with humanity almost since the very beginning. And I think as Kiwis, we have a really unhealthy relationship with conflict. See, we're of the culture, culture. We don't really want to put our neck out on the line. We don't really want to nail our flags to the mast, because we don't want to create more conflict. So we have this innate ability, I think, as New Zealanders to kind of sniff conflict. It's almost like if we enter a room, our brain is like, there's conflict happening over there. Get out. And you can't see us for dust. We run away from conflict. Whereas other nations and other cultures seem to really love conflict. I mean, if they can sense conflict, they'll run to conflict and they'll get involved. They'll get involved in a verbal, if not a physical, altercation. So two really extreme ways of dealing with conflict. But both of them have really unhealthy dynamics at play in the way they respond to conflict. So as I was thinking about this morning, thinking about what I was going to bring, and chatting with God about it, don't worry, this is going to get a little bit more encouraging. It's not going to be as dire as this. As I was thinking about it, I was thinking, as time goes on, we're going to be involved in conflict. And in fact, it might increase in different places. For you, it might increase in your family. There might be more conflict in your family. Might be more conflict at work, and maybe you're a student and you're at high school or university, and conflict might escalate. And I thought this morning, there has to be another way other than burying our head in the sand and running away from conflict, or getting really aggro and just running to conflict and getting really involved. There has to be another way of dealing with conflict. And this journey brought me to the true story of my second most favourite real life person in the Bible, other than Jesus. It was Joseph in the Old Testament, at the very beginning of the Bible. And we find in Genesis that Joseph is dealing with some conflict. And in the pages of history, from history itself, from this real life experience, this revelation that Joseph had, it's not from the outer man, it's from the inner man, the spirit experience of God. He brings forth this godly wisdom of how we can deal with conflict in a healthy way. And as we progress this morning, Joseph is going to show us that we should avoid the last musical chair, that we should embrace the now and the not yet. And finally, we should lavish kindness on those in whom we find we're in conflict with. So I invite you to turn with me in your devices or in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 50, and we're going to begin in verse 15. But before we do that, a little bit of a backstory. Joseph had a pretty good start to life. He was, Joseph is this guy of the Technicolor coat fame. He wasn't just the subject of a musical. He was a real life person. Had a pretty awesome start to life. He got given the honor of it from his father of being given this multicolored coat, this symbol of honor. He was interpreting dreams, and then his brothers got jealous. And instead of punching Joseph in the face or throwing some stones at him, like my brother and I would do when we got annoyed at each other, they sold him into slavery. I mean, it's a pretty harsh response. Anyway, he's sold into slavery, and it goes from bad to very worst. He's accused of a crime he doesn't commit, gets put in prison, and then life starts to pick up for him. He starts to interpret dreams. Pharaoh, who's the ruler of the land in this context, in this time, he finds out about it. Joseph interprets dreams for him, and then eventually Joseph becomes the second in charge, almost like the prime minister of Egypt. And so we pick up the story, this true story. This really happened. This is a true account of what happened in the life of Joseph. In Genesis 50, and starting in verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. This is the word of God. Now, what we tend to do as Christians, and we've done this all through our history, is if we disagree with the way that we do church, our ecclesiology, I mean, this is the reason we have denominations, is in our history, we would judge, we would demean, and sometimes we would kill people. We would kill other Christian people in our history for doing church differently, for disagreements over doctrine, over our beliefs. We would pour judgment upon each other. And we also do that to people out there in the world. We've condemned people to hell for having abortions and for their sexuality. We love to judge. And what we do in doing that, we're believing the oldest lie whispered in the garden by Satan himself. You can become like God. You can become like God. And it's like the ring of power in the Lord of the Rings. Even though our intention might be good, even our intentions may come from a good place at the very beginning. With the ring of power, even people who are wanting to use the ring of power for good become corrupted by it. And when we judge other people, we are usurping the role of God. We are trying to elbow him off the throne in the last game of musical chairs, when there's one chair left and there's two people running for that chair. We're trying to elbow God off that chair and take the chair, his throne, for ourselves. And you see, when Joseph approaches conflict, from the outset, even after everything that his brothers had done to him, from the outset he says, am I in the place of God? So basically what Joseph is saying is, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to judge you at all. And so my encouragement to you, from Joseph's life, from the pages of history, from the revelation on Joseph's heart, is when you enter into conflict, make it really clear that you're not judging somebody. I had a friend, this was about a decade ago, who was convinced that the Pope, before Pope Francis, was the Antichrist. And he just kept sending me messages after message after message about this. And it got to a point where I had to say, hey mate, I don't judge you for this. This is how you see things. This is not how I see things. But actually, this isn't beneficial to us. And so I try to approach this by communicating to him, I don't judge you, but this is how I see the situation. So my encouragement to you, and the encouragement of God from the scriptures, is when you're entering into conflict, do it from a non-judgmental point. Make it really clear that as you're entering into this conflict, that you're doing it without judgment. And as we do that, Joseph encourages us, God encourages us through the life of Joseph, that we should embrace the now and not yet. See, Joseph is pretty honest with his brothers. In one of the most famous scriptures surrounding Joseph's life, he says to his brothers, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. You see, when we hear that we have to approach conflict with humility and without judgment, we sometimes equate that as Kiwis as not actually saying what we really think. And the way that Joseph conducts himself, he tells his brothers, he's unequivocal, but unemotionally manipulative. He's not trying to emotionally manipulate his brothers, like his brothers tried to do to him. I mean, look at the way that Joseph is acting towards his brothers. Joseph does his talking face to face. His brothers send a message. I mean, we can dig into that a little bit more, but basically, don't send a message. Have a phone call. Don't post stuff on social media. Have a phone call. If you can, enter into that conflict. Resolve that conflict face to face, if you can. Anyway, so Joseph front foots it. He embraces the now of the situation. But he also holds in balance the now. This is how I feel about this conflict and what you've done to me. He embraces the now, but he also has a mountaintop view of the conflict. He doesn't get caught and bogged down in the mire of the now. He holds the now and the not yet. This tension, he holds this tension together. He has a mountaintop view of what this conflict has done and is continuing to be done in his life and in the lives of others. Because he says, you meant to harm me now, but God is doing good things through what you intended for harm. The now and the mountaintop view, the way that God sees the situation. And so as we enter into conflict, I encourage you to enter into it without judgment, without elbowing God off his throne, taking that last musical chair. Non-judgment, coming in, and we are holding on to the now. So this is how I feel in the situation, unequivocally, but unemotionally, and also having a view of what God is doing through this conflict. Many of you know my story. I had a pretty bad experience with the church, not this church. and there was emotional manipulation, there was bullying, there was redundancy. And in the moment, I was stuck in the mire of the now. I didn't have God's perspective of what was going on. But now I look and see that I'm a youth worker at Howick College. And if it wasn't for the bad stuff that happened, I wouldn't have been a youth worker at Howick College. I wouldn't be serving all those young people. So my encouragement to you is have that view of the now and the not yet. Don't get caught down in the mire of the conflict that you're in. Enter into it without judgment and hold the tension of the now, how you're feeling, and being honest and open without being emotionally manipulative. And also ask God for his perspective of what he's doing through that conflict. And finally, Joseph lavishes kindness on his brothers. And we read that Joseph said, "Don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. I'm going to be honest. There's been times that I've been caught up in conflict and I've wanted to get revenge. I haven't wanted to act kindly towards people that I'm in conflict with. I've wanted to win the argument, and in doing so, sometimes I've lost the person. And so this place that this way that Joseph has positioned himself before his brothers, he could have killed his brothers. He had the power to do that. He had the power to rain down judgment and vengeance on them. But he decides to take another road. Now, this cannot come from the flesh. It has to come from an inner revelation, an inner experience of lavish kindness. And if you look at the whole story arc, this whole journey of Joseph, he experienced the lavish kindness of God, even though bad stuff happened in his life. See, Joseph isn't a downer about the stuff that happened in his life. But he doesn't romanticize it either. He's pretty open and honest. Bad stuff will happen in your life, but God is working all things together for good. Now you see, Joseph was draped in this coat of many colours, and he was wrongly accused. We follow, we experience, we love and are loved by the better Joseph, a perfect Joseph, who was also wrongly accused. And also, he was draped in a robe of scarlet, but not one that was one of honour and one of prestige. It was one of shame, and he bore that shame. Jesus Christ, the better, perfect Joseph, bore that shame to bring reconciliation, to bring us back together with God. And through that, we can experience the lavish kindness of God, the lavish kindness of Jesus Christ. And when you experience that, when it's in here, you can't help but lavish kindness in conflict. And we are meant to be the difference in the world. We are meant to bring the salt and the light. And in a world that seems to be getting even more filled more and more with conflict as each day progresses, we need to return to our first love. We need to return to the lavish kindness, of Christ, to get a fresh revelation of that. So as we enter into conflict, we don't run away from it, but we don't get violent either. We take this third way that brings about the many colours of peace in our world. As we enter into conflict without judging, as we hold the tension of now and not yet, saying how we feel in the conflict, unequivocally but not emotionally manipulative. And as we try and grasp God's perspective of this conflict, and as we lavish kindness in whatever way God directs us, we will bring the many colours of peace into the conflict in our worlds. So let us go forward and bring the many colours of peace into our world this week. God bless you.